All right, we are live now.
Cool. Hi, everyone. I'm also going to be in the chat a lot, so um, feel free to ask any questions there. Um, what I wanted to do with this particular talk is discuss any interest or possibilities about getting what's called Genevi, or open source automotive hardware, from the Genevi Alliance into Ubuntu. Um, if you don't know about Genevi, it's essentially a group of car makers that got together along with Intel and what are called tier ones, which are large software houses that are particular automotive suppliers. And they formed an alliance whereby they can share code and software, and they've decided to move forward and build software in open source, on open source, with open source licenses. Now, this is kind of new for an industry that's somewhat conservative, and they're kind of late to the party, but they're really actually producing open source software with real open source licenses. It's free software. It's under the Mozilla public license. But it's difficult to integrate because it tends to be...
Jeremiah, it sounds like...
Sure. It's a little laggy, I guess.
I thought you had a video going. It was me. Go ahead.
Sure. In any case, the automotive industry would like to have a thriving ecosystem. And one of the ways I think of getting a thriving ecosystem to help kick the tires of Genevi software, or to reuse it, or to fix bugs, or what have you, is to get that software into Ubuntu, for example, and see if maybe people want to test it out or even put it on a car if possible. So that's what this talk was mainly to be about, to test the waters, see the interest.
So, hey, Jeremy, Alexander here from Ubuntu Core. So I'm interested to understand from you what parts of the software stack you're really interested in delivering through Ubuntu. I mean, I think you initially said you want to get hardware support in it, but I think you meant software, right? I mean, you want to get the software in. So in which parts of the stack? I mean, how does the car stack look like, and where do you want to standardize, and where are people then supposed to change depending on which car they are building and what kind of innovation they want to do?
Yep, no, that's an awesome question. The car stack is essentially a plain vanilla stack from Yocto. So it's a Yocto build currently, and they use Pokey as their reference distro. So they're using components that you'll be familiar with, libc6. They've chosen systemd as their startup mechanism, and they built some stuff around that, but it's essentially just middleware that sits on top of a very average mobile, so connected with mobility, very simple Linux stack. Genevi will develop some software higher up on the stack, possibly things like interface, although that's considered kind of competitive. But mostly what they would like to do is create middleware, so that when you come with your application, it will work on any automaker's application, on any Genevi compliant distribution. And what are Genevi compliant distributions? Well, they tend to be spun up with Yocto, but Tizen IBI, for example, is one. And that's pretty widely used. For example, Jaguar Land Rover uses it. Intel delivers it to customers. I think Nissan uses it, or used Migo, things like that. So essentially the stack is a vanilla Linux stack with all pieces in the middleware, and then the goal is to put apps on top of that. Is that helpful?
Yes. I mean, it's a good start. Let me ask you, what is different on the middleware? I mean, there must be something different. I mean, what special components and functions or functionality do you provide there? That's one question. And the other is, how do you, I mean, what is your API for application developers? Is it like an API that you maintain, or you just take whatever, you allow people to just use everything there is, or do you restrict people to use something? But I'm more interested initially on what middleware and support do you add that is different from a desktop. That would be cool to know.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's not a lot that's different from the desktop, to be honest. For example, one of the things that we do is we create components called lifecycle components, and that's designed to check node state. And a node in this case is usually an ECU, which is an engine control unit. So you talk to the microcontroller and say, are you, if you're dead, then we're going to go into shutdown mode, for example, and then it brings the system down. These life cycle components are designed around the particularities of a car, which has a very large engine and a lot of electromagnetic disturbance. So you need to make sure that when you do the initial power on, that all the nodes did get brought up and that there hasn't been any problems in the bring up, and it's a multi-node system. So there's a little bit of software around that. That's going to actually get described, the lifecycle components are going to get described in a Linux Foundation talk. There are also things like interfaces to speech. We've got something called IVI speech, but underneath that could use implementations, so it could use eSpeak. There's some navigation APIs that Genevi develops. Those are built with Navit, so you can run Navit against those APIs. But that is pretty much just plain desktop stuff as well. Let's see, I can take a look at our Git repo, which is just Git Genevi. Sorry, Git projects.genevi.org. And there's not a lot there that's not really able to be run inside a desktop, if you will. So the diff is very, very small.
Right. Is this, I mean, how can I think about it? Is it like one node that runs, let's say, Yocto or Ubuntu on it, and this has X and everything, or is that a headless system?
Exactly. It's got, you can think of it as a Yocto spin that runs on a CPU, a powerful CPU, that will talk with the ECUs and gather sensor data from them. But the CPU is designed to be a multimedia unit, so it's essentially a tablet stuck in the car. It will have X because it needs to manage layers. For example, if a phone call comes in while you're driving and the radio is on, there's going to be policy that says, okay, pop up the phone call to the highest layer on the screen so that the driver knows that, okay, here comes an incoming phone call, and then you'll also want to sync the sound. So that's one of the things that might be specific to automotive, is that our layer management. We have tools for that. That's actually quite popular, and all we're doing is working against Wayland, so all that's available. Another thing that we have, you mentioned before, do we require people to work against APIs? We have this thing called Common API, but it's essentially just a tool. It's designed to make the API to the Genevi components more easy to use, but it's not a requirement. You can certainly build without it.
Okay, good. I mean, but the APIs, are they strictly directed at the applications, or is it also like in the middleware APIs where you basically say, if you want to extend the system, you can basically rely on these being available in all Genevi components? So can you extend the middleware for a specific IVI solution, or is it just apps that you basically add on top?
Currently, it's just apps, and in many ways, you'd have to discover the APIs yourself. In other words, since we're using BlueZ, we'll expose BlueZ's API to somebody who wanted to communicate via Bluetooth. We're working on creating a unified API throughout the whole system, so that you could take this as a platform and develop random applications on top of it, and know that all that the platform API specification or interface would remain versioned and existent going forward. But we haven't really unified the APIs yet. That's work that's ongoing.
Right. Okay. But I mean, the applications, that's like an open application store where like people can install something, or is it like restricted? It's just a mean to make a custom car solution that you can make your own apps and you put them on there, but like users will not have a way to basically go to a store and just get new stuff, or what is the vision?
I think the vision is that, well, I don't know that we've talked that much about app stores. Companies like Bosch certainly do have a solution where they will provide a secure app store, if you will, or a trusted app store, which will probably be vendor specific. So, for example, if you're driving a Jaguar and it has a Geneva system, available applications will probably come from Jaguar. I don't think that there's any talk, say, of a broader ecosystem at this point in time, whereby random apps can just be installed.
Okay, good. All right, I think I got enough from this. I just don't know. So, I mean, how do you think? I mean, you say you want to have a thriving community. I mean, what do you think? What kind of community is that? I mean,
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that what they would like to see is a thriving automotive community. For the for many software developers, I think they'd rather see an open community. That is a community where anybody can get software, which exists today, but they're also well-known working hardware configurations that are easy to buy. Currently, automotive hardware is very expensive. So one of the things about being involved with Ubuntu is that Ubuntu tends to have really good kernel support for a lot of different ARM kernels. And you could look at stuff like, I don't know, TI BeagleBoard or IMX6, I think there's good support there, or NVIDIA software, NVIDIA chips. And then we could have an Ubuntu spin and put Geneve's layer on top of it, which is a very small layer. And then that would enable a whole wide range of software developers and users who are familiar with Ubuntu to just take this, start thinking about putting it on test equipment that's available and affordable, or just emulate, and begin to work on it. But it's very difficult if your only new is just Yocto, because
Right.
people need to then learn how to use Yocto. Then they can start development and use.
So why are they not using Ubuntu now? What is the reason? I guess that's something maybe we should figure.
Sure. Well, in fact, the company I work for a company called Logicor. We built an Ubuntu Geneva compliant distro, I guess about 3 years ago. And then there was the whole upstart systemd thing. We tried to get Geneva to understand that they shouldn't probably specify a single init system, but probably specify a set of features that they expected out of it. Use upstart if you needed to. But they didn't want to do that. So I think that there was, the option was, okay, you can use Ubuntu, but you have to rip out upstart and stuff in systemd, and that was prohibitively expensive. So I think what's changing now, though, I think if in the future systemd seems to be an easier integration into Ubuntu, then I think that the whole process of integrating Geneva on top of it would be a lot easier. So I'm just trying to test the waters now to see if that's something that people are not categorically objecting to, and then
So
see
what
if
exactly went into your Ubuntu respin for Geneva? And are those changes available in the Ubuntu archives, or do you have them separate?
I think it's called Ubuntu IVI. They should be in the archives. It was a spin done by Canonical, and then we maintained parts of it. Later on, we just took Ubuntu Core and added Geneva packages on top of that, which we packaged ourselves, and submitted that for Geneva compliance, and was accepted. What constitutes those images is just what's in Geneva's Git repos and what was available in Ubuntu Core. That's it.
Cool. How do you do this? I mean, you use a PPA, I guess, and so on, and then you have a reference stack. So, but I mean, now I wonder who is actually building the systems that go into the car, and how would they do it? I mean, can they do it with Ubuntu, or is there something missing that they can just not do it? I guess they want to customize further and so on. I mean, what would they do?
I think it's a little bit, there's business process involved. I mean, the car companies love process, and they work with specific suppliers. Their supply chain is very carefully controlled, so they're not going to just work with any software developer. So they tend to work with operating system vendors. Companies like Wind River and Mentor Graphics are really big. Mentor Graphics in particular is incredibly big in automotive. And so what happens is that they'll go to them and they'll say what they want. And Mentor Graphics will create that spin and deliver it to them, and they'll add their HMI and things like that. Mentor will reintegrate it and then push it on the production line incredibly quickly, where once the image is built, tested extensively, and then they push on the production line incredibly quickly, and then it goes out. So getting Ubuntu into that would probably require some form of support with Canonical, and I think at those final production stages, there's heaps and heaps of support and money involved and a variety of logistics. Like you usually have to have people in-house. So like Mentor Graphics will actually send people to Munich or Stuttgart or Gothenburg or wherever it is the car is being built to work there on site. You'll have to have extensive contractual relationships and all that stuff. But where Ubuntu is widely used is on the desktops of all the developers who write the software. Whether it's BMW or Jaguar, these guys are all writing this stuff right on Ubuntu. And I think that if we can give them access to an easier way, for example, to install Genevi software, I think Ubuntu would be the de facto development distribution for these car companies. And as such, it would slowly make its way, I think, into possibly production in the future. I believe that could happen.
Right. Yeah, so I assume there must be like a whole set of problems and of hard to
Problems
take what we have and bring it in. But yeah,
there are, but
so
they're
I like
mostly
this idea.
political. They're political problems, not technical problems. The technical problems, I think, could be fairly easily solved in Ubuntu.
I'm not
Which
quite
problem
sure
could you
what
Go ahead,
what are
Brian.
what are the actual technical problems? I mean, if you're developing, you're not going to want it in the archive. You're going to want it from the Git repo. So what's blocking there?
Oh, good point. There's nothing blocking there. Well, I'm thinking sort of from the community manager's perspective. If I can get those Git repos packaged, then I can get the software into the hands of a lot of developers, and Ubuntu has a lot of developers and a lot of users.
So can you currently run that Genevi middleware on top of regular Ubuntu desktop or in a virtual machine on the desktop so that we can try it out without having actual hardware specific for it?
Yes, you can do that today from the Yocto image because the Yocto spins up a QEMU image.
Okay.
But to do it built against Ubuntu, say 14.10, the packages would need some updating.
Okay. Can you paste some links to that and like
I'd be happy
the
to.
Genevi stack and APIs for us?
Absolutely. What Genevi spins up are things they call baselines. There's two. One is built by a company called CodeThink. I don't know if you guys are familiar with their stuff. They have a tool called BaseRock. Hello, internets.
So this is somewhat side topic, but are some of the cars actually shipping with Navid-based navigation?
No, almost always what happens is that they swap that out.
Okay.
So TomTom will come in and do that.
Got it.
Oops. So while you're typing, what is the the connectivity in the update story for cars? I mean, do they update the systems at all, or do they want to do that and they cannot do it, or is it not
Yes, the
connected? I
second.
mean,
Yeah, it is connected. It's going to have LTE as well as Wi-Fi. Many of the cars already have that today. They have telematic solutions. And many cars are moving to LTE. Newer cars will tend to have Wi-Fi. Not all of them do at this time. There's not a clear picture exactly how to do over-the-air updates. Some companies, I believe, do it. Some companies require that you go to the dealership. Going to the dealership is very, very expensive for the car companies. It costs roughly about 2,000 euros So asking a customer to come back to the dealership to upload software or to flash firmware is a very expensive proposition.
So
In some
Well, yeah.
cases,
is
for example,
definitely something we want.
yeah, absolutely. Yep. They don't have a good solution for it today, I think.
I think this needs to be solved, right? I mean, look, if they're connected and so on, the security updates, I mean, you have to get those on those cars. So you don't need to drive somewhere and so on. Otherwise, your system will be hacked and what else. So
Absolutely.
what is their, why are they not doing the updates? Because they don't think, they don't know how to do it, or they don't know that it's needed, or it's just they don't have the technology to do that.
It's a good question. I think that often what happens, or sometimes what happens, is they're running an RTOS underneath. And that RTOS, often it's QNX, which is a POSIX-based real-time operating system. And then they'll put in a hypervisor Linux. And so they might not have much issue updating Linux per se, but they have a huge issue updating firmware. Now, as they may move to a pure Linux solution, they very much want to do this. Then they're actually scared to death of what happens if there's a firmware update and the car stops. That's really scary, at least to the responsible car companies. Tesla has done that twice. It's had pushed out in-field upgrades, and the cars have died. But a company like BMW just won't do that.
Okay. I thought they would solve that by separating those systems strictly, and you have just one part that is mission critical, and then the other part, that's the application fun part, basically, that as long as maybe it breaks, but you can just roll another update quickly to fix it, it's okay. Is that not what they're doing anymore? So.
I think they're looking at things like, well, they're certainly looking at better FS and being able to roll back if something goes bad and quick booting kernels. But when you get down to the lower level architecture of the firmware, I think each company tends to roll their own, and they tend to rely on their hypervisor vendor, things like that. So it's hard for me to say if there's a general fast rule.
Yeah.
But I do think that they would like to move to Linux, and I don't think that they have a clear vision of what. If it's
So
done
sorry,
over.
you broke up for a minute, for a second. I mean, but I think I heard what I wanted to hear. Cool. Or not cool. That's good. So updates, enabling them to do updates needs to be solved still.
That would be a huge win for the industry. Huge.
Right. Okay.
But have you been keeping up with what we've been doing on the phone side? Because it sounds like there's a lot of similarities between what we needed for phones and what you would need for a car.
Absolutely. I think there would be a lot of overlap. I'm not familiar, and I'm more than happy to get familiar if you were to point me in the right direction.
Alex, do you want to kind of give an overview of system images?
No, I mean, but we're exploring ways to do stuff different. I mean, like, what can we do with system images in other areas? So, I mean, but I think it's far too early. No, but it's good. So, I mean, what do we need to do in any case here to ensure that Ubuntu is more useful for this Geneva alliance? So I think you say you have software that still might need to go in to be readily available. What else? I mean, what else could we do to say that basically people are not, that they also like Ubuntu rather than Yocto to use that to basically do their current work without solving the other problems?
I really don't think there's a lot to do. I mean, the Geneva Alliance has really tried hard to follow open source best practices, and it's pretty straightforward. The Geneva software, and as I said, it's all been built against Ubuntu before. I really think the final step is to make the required Geneva software Ubuntu packaged so that a user can do apt get install. I really think that would be it.
Right. So just to get everything in. Okay.
Yeah, and if it's of interest to anybody, our company, our Geneva members, and we could submit it for Geneva compliance, but that's just marketing.
Right. Okay.
But what it would do in an
So yeah, I mean, I don't.
sorry, I think one thing would help a great deal is like our main competition, if you will, is the POSIX operating system QNX, as I mentioned, and they claim that using Genevi software is very expensive. One of the reasons that it's very expensive is that you have to use Yocto, and you tend to have to go through an operating systems vendor. But it's hard to explain to the card companies that that's not necessary. And I think if we were to build an Ubuntu spin and have it running on commodity hardware or COTS, something simple, as touchscreen, and just simple run Navit or what have you, I think that would make a powerful impression upon a lot of card companies. And I think they would say, wow, that looks pretty good. That is definitely possible to do. We should take another look at that. And I fundamentally believe that would change a lot of companies' view.
Right. Yeah, I fully agree. I just don't know what to do now. I think we should. I mean, do you have a list of stuff that you need to get in, or where the problems are, or do you have problems getting stuff into the archive? I mean, that's already?
No, not at all. There are no problems getting into the archive. There are no real issues at all. It's just this. We've gone out of sync, Genevi and Ubuntu, and I just want to bring it back in sync and see that Genevi can be a first-class citizen as an Ubuntu respin, or sit on Ubuntu, or just work with Ubuntu. That's all. I just want to make sure that Genevi software is in the ecosystem and people can use it.
So, are we out of sync technically? Like, is there a code mismatch, or are we just out of sync in terms of communication?
It's out of sync community, and then we stopped building Ubuntu spins for Genevi in, I think, 2011. So, and I don't want to do the required work for packaging if nobody's interested, or if Ubuntu was to say, no, go away, you people are crazy, kind of thing.
So, what work would be involved in getting those builds?
I think my vision of the next step is for me to work with whomever to stuff Genevi debs into a PPA that could be installed onto a 1410 system, maybe in VirtualBox. That's it. And then from there, I would like to, with Ubuntu, identify perhaps a Freescale CPU and an inexpensive IMX board that we could use as hardware validation for ARM, and start saying, look, this is a running Genevi system. And then, start bringing in some other software to make it much more relevant, more coherent.
Right. Do you have? No, I mean, I think we should take this offline. I have to check on a few things. I don't know the history of Genevi and why things are like they are now. I'm sure there are pretty good reasons. So
there are. I mean, it's worth talking
theory,
about.
I mean, you have the right motivation. I mean, yes. I mean, I think Ubuntu is the platform of choice for people that want to access a huge developer community and that want to get a thriving ecosystem. And we just have to figure out what it is. I mean, what prevented this from happening. And,
well,
I assume there are technical challenges that also didn't help a lot to keep focus on the Genevi side here.
There essentially were two. It was the upstart versus System D was a big issue, because back in the day, it wasn't Chris Kenyon, it was somebody else who was saying that, System D is not going to get adopted by Ubuntu, and that was okay. Then there's not really much point to go further. But there was also a GPL v3 issue. And when Genevi would talk, say at board level with Chris Kenyon, bring him in, Chris was like, look, the GPL v3 is our preferred license. You should adopt it. There's nothing wrong with it, et cetera, et cetera. But the car companies essentially ended up blacklisting it because they don't
want
to give away the key.
Jeremy?
Mm-hmm.
Could we make this offline, maybe?
Sure.
I think this is not on the technical side anymore.
No, it's not technical. It's all politics.
Thanks. Yeah. So let's discuss what's going on there. I think, we know from the technical side that we have identified good challenges. I think we have a very well-aligned view on basically how a system could look like, or basically what a system that have a thriving community with apps and so on would be around. And I think we should
Yep.
check basically what and if we can do something offline on this one. That's my feeling.
Great.
And also on the technical side, if you hadn't heard, Ubuntu will eventually be moving to System D.
I had heard that, and I thought that maybe would provide an opening for us.
Yeah, I think I know Martin Pitt has been involved in that. I'm not sure who else is involved, and I don't know if we have an ETA yet on when that's going to happen. But it is in progress.
There's a discussion scheduled for later today. So.
Okay.
I can't imagine it'll be a blocker. I mean, I'm sure that when things are ready, I mean, the development times for cars are 2 or 3 years, so I'm sure you guys will probably have things up and running well before and it becomes a big issue.
So, the emulator that you mentioned was available. Is that on one of these 2 links you've given us?
I'm trying to find that. I'm trying to see if they've got the binary available. They should. But I don't know if they do. I think you may have to build it from scratch, in which case I might go ahead and pass one around for x86 and Kimo.
Right. Maybe can we take an action? I mean, could you also give me like an architecture overview about how your system looks like, and
I can try and do that
afterwards.
Yep.
You don't have it. I mean, at some point, for me, it's very important to understand how the system stacks look like, where are separations of applications and APIs, and to see how this whole thing can be realized.
Yep.
You mentioned earlier that a lot of Genevi developers use Ubuntu on their desktop. Do you know what development environment they prefer?
They generally use Eclipse.
Okay, just vanilla Eclipse, or do they have specific plugin for Genevi development?
We use a set of plugins. One's called Yamaka with a Y. Another one's called Franca, which just creates IDLs, or interface definition language files, so that you can more easily specify an interface between something.
Can you spell those for me?
Sure. They're both upstream at Eclipse.
Okay.
So right now the update story is really just release the build at the release of the car and then not update it pretty much ever.
It does get updated, but again, that often happens in the dealership.
And is that just due to a recall where it's already going back to the dealership or something?
Right.
Like that?
It's on either an appointed time when you have a checkup or it's covered under warranty, or if it's a critical emergency, then they will summon it back for a recall. I think Ford actually once sent out SD cards, but that was when they were using Microsoft Sync. So that's something I think they'd rather avoid. But still, that story about updating is very, very unclear for the car companies themselves.
Is there a way to try the Genevi system, downloading it?
Excuse me? Is there any way to try it?
Yeah,
You know,
try download it, run it in a VM or something, or
That
develop
was
against
the
it. Or...
emulator image we were.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Currently they're at, or you're required to build it yourself with the Octo and then run it in Keynote. But I can't see if I can't build an image and distribute it myself.
All right.
It's just they're doing vendor lock-in by another means.
And as far as developing the apps, is there a specific toolkit that Genevi uses?
I don't think that there is agreement among the car makers that that is not competitive. So they feel, I think, that the app interface is going to be competitive. And some companies are going for HTML. For example, Tizen IVI, which is Geneva compliant, is using Crosswalk, but which is a web runtime. But that's really a choice of Intel to make sure that Crosswalk can enable, say, the Chromium or Chrome features. Um, Other companies would much prefer to use native development. And Qt, I think, is looked at and used by a lot of companies. So having a good Qt interface is definitely good. That's actually something that the company that I work for does. We create something called Qt IPI, which is just a set of libraries that allows you to access an underlying in-vehicle infotainment system. Um, but there are other ways to do it too. For example, I think Samsung and Hyundai use EFL. Um, There are Bosch uses GTK in some cases. They use Qt in other cases. And then there are a number of
Pretty
automotive systems.
Genevi's much lower level than that, than what you specify
Yes.
there.
Yep. The HMI is really a competitive differentiator, so Geneva doesn't creep up in that level.
All right, so we do we have any guys in the session other than Alex to sync up offline to see what we can do about getting those builds restarted?
That sounds great. I think that's a great next step.
All right. I've taken several notes in the attached Etherpad document.
Cool.
If you can find those emulator images, or if you can build one and put it available somewhere, if you can drop a link to that in the Etherpad,
Absolutely. I'll make sure to
that'd be
follow.
good. All right, and I know you're already on Launchpad, so if you need to set up like a Geneva team,
Mm-hmm.
get going for that.
Cool.
You should be able to do that, and if you have any questions on that, let me know and I'll help you out.
That'll be awesome.
All right. Ali, I think on IRC is interested in how he can follow up.
Ah, okay. I'll jump on
I,
that.
I was just asking if we could, how could we follow up with this? I mean, to see how things will go from this step to the next step. And is there any mailing list something we could follow up with?
We're trying to get, it's amazing, we don't have, say, a general IVI mailing list in Geneva. We've got a bunch of specific ones, but not a general one. What do you recommend? I mean, is there...
I have something in mind. Well, still nothing. I mean, we are just doing a brainstorming session, but how about we create a Launchpad team, and whoever is interested about that, he could or she could join, and let's see how this will develop. And we could have a mailing list, and I could set up this within less than 5 minutes for you if you wish.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm not
That would
sure
be
about
awesome.
Michael. What do you think, Michael?
I think that's fine.
Okay.
And if you don't
So
mind
just
setting it up and being the owner of
yeah,
that team until something
until
changes.
somebody else will step in.
Okay, yeah, because I know you're spread over a lot of different Ubuntu projects are. already. I don't want.
I couldn't hear you. That was stuck. Did you say
Oh,
something?
I said I know that you're spread over a bunch of different Ubuntu projects already,
Oh
and
yeah.
I don't want to overburden you with
Yes.
yet another
Yes.
project to run.
Yes. Because one of the things it's not really off topic. One of the project I have at Storios, it's based on the Ubuntu core system, but we built that to be as light as possible. It should be even lighter than Ubuntu. So I'm interested to find out how this will go. So let's see. Jeremiah, I'm going to send you my contact so we could keep in touch, just
Great.
in case we need to. Yeah, I'm going to send you my wiki page on the ARC, and you could find all my contacts there. So feel free to contact me anytime.
Great. Let me see if I can look up my Launchpad name.
Yeah, if you could just send that to me here, so I can add you.
Sure. Let's see. There we are.
All right, well, we are out of time now. So thank you, Jeremy, for setting this up.
Thank you very much for allowing me to come and talk with you guys. It was really helpful.
I hope it's the start of many conversations and we can get this off the ground.
I hope so as well. I'm kind of optimistic. So yeah.
All right.
We're having a FOSDEM talk. We have a automotive dev room every year at FOSDEM. So if any of you guys would go to FOSDEM, hopefully we can meet there and we can follow up, as well as just update the status and see where we are. You can meet some other people doing the automotive software if anyone's interested.
All right, I know Canonical sends people to Boston, I think, every year. So I don't know who's coming to the next one, but try and find out for you.
Cool.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Talk to you guys later.